They warned him not to whistle in the forest. 'Cause something always listens. In a remote corner of the world, where ancient trees whispered secrets to the wind, there stood a cabin. It was a place forgotten by time, its weathered wood telling tales of years gone by. This was where Miles found himself, a 26-year-old introverted backpacker seeking solitude in the wilderness his grandfather once called home. The journey to the cabin had been long and arduous, winding through dense forests that seemed to grow thicker with each passing mile. As Miles approached the clearing, he couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching him from the shadows. The trees creaked and groaned, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers, beckoning him deeper into their domain. The cabin stood silent, a sentinel against the encroaching darkness. Miles fumbled with the old key, his hands trembling slightly as he pushed open the heavy wooden door. Dust motes danced in the fading sunlight that filtered through grimy windows, illuminating a space frozen in time. As night fell, Miles settled into an uneasy routine. He lit a fire in the ancient stone hearth, its warmth a feeble defense against the chill that seemed to seep from the very walls. The flames cast flickering shadows that danced across the room, their movements almost lifelike in their eerie grace. Outside, the forest grew still. Too still. The usual chorus of nocturnal creatures was conspicuously absent, placed by a silence so profound it pressed against Miles' ears like a physical force. He found himself straining to hear something, anything, to break the unnatural quiet. It was then that he remembered the warning. A half-forgotten conversation with his mother before he left, her eyes wide with concern as she recounted an old family legend. "Never whistle in the forest at night," she had said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It calls to them and they always listen." Miles had laughed it off then, dismissing it as nothing more than superstition. But now, surrounded by the oppressive silence of the forest, the warning took on a new, sinister weight. He found himself fighting the urge to break the silence, to prove to himself that there was nothing to fear. As the night wore on, Miles' resolve began to crumble. The silence became unbearable, pressing in on him from all sides. Without conscious thought, he found himself pursing his lips, a soft whistle escaping before he could stop it. The sound hung in the air for a moment, eerily clear in the stillness of the night. Then, as if in response, a branch snapped in the darkness beyond the cabin's walls. Miles froze, his heart pounding in his chest as he strained to listen. At first, there was nothing. Then, so faint he almost missed it, came an answering whistle. It was a perfect mimicry of his own, but there was something off about it, something inhuman in its precision. Miles scrambled to his feet, his eyes darting to the windows. In the pale moonlight, he could see nothing but the silhouettes of trees, their branches swaying gently in a breeze he couldn't feel. But as he watched, the shadows seemed to shift and move in ways that defied natural explanation. The whistling came again, closer now. It was joined by others, a chorus of ethereal sounds that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Miles backed away from the windows, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He fumbled for his phone, desperate to call for help, but the screen remained stubbornly dark. No signal. He was alone, cut off from the world, with only the whistling for company. As the night wore on, the sounds grew closer. Miles huddled in the center of the cabin, his eyes wide and unblinking as he stared at the door. The wood seemed to bend and warp, shadows seeping through the cracks like tendrils of smoke. Just before dawn, when the darkness was at its deepest, Miles heard it. Soft scratching at the door, like fingernails dragging across wood. The handle began to turn, slowly, inexorably. Miles wanted to run, to hide, but his body refused to obey. He could only watch in horror as the door creaked open, revealing a darkness deeper than the blackest night. And from that darkness came a figure, its form shifting and changing with each step. It was as if the forest itself had taken shape, branches and leaves twisting into a vaguely humanoid form. But where a face should have been, there was only a void, a blackness that seemed to drink in what little light remained. The figure stood motionless in the doorway, regarding Miles with that featureless face. Then, slowly, it raised a hand formed of twigs and shadows. From the depths of its non-existent mouth came a whistle, a perfect recreation of the one Miles had made hours before. Miles tried to scream, but no sound came out. He could only watch in mute terror as more figures emerged from the darkness. each one a nightmarish amalgamation of forest and shadow. They filled the cabin, surrounding him in a circle of writhing branches and whispering leaves. As the first rays of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the figures began to fade, melting back into the shadows from whence they came. But as they disappeared, Miles felt a change come over him. It was as if a part of the forest had taken root in his very soul, leaving him forever changed. When search parties finally found the cabin days later, they discovered Miles sitting in the center of the room, his eyes dark and empty. Branches and leaves sprouted from his skin, and when he opened his mouth, all that emerged was a soft, haunting whistle. The forest had claimed another listener, another soul to join its eternal chorus. And as the rescuers fled in terror, the wind through the trees seemed to carry a warning. Never whistle in the forest, because something always listens. Still here? If this gave you chills, drop a like and follow for more twisted stories like this one.